Welcome back to the Comfort Food series. Today we're making the humble potato soup. I had this soup quite a bit growing up as a kid, and it's definitely one of my favorite soups from my younger aging days. And this soup is really easy to make, so with that said, let's get started.
The first thing we're going to do is render off 10 pieces of bacon that have been cut into half-inch pieces. We're going to render our bacon over medium-low heat. You want to throw your bacon in a cold pan so we can slowly render out all the fat, just like we did in our bacon jam video. You want to use a large stock pot for this, or a pan that has a heavy bottom like a Dutch oven. We're going to cook our bacon till it's nice and crispy. The best way to cut bacon is if you throw it in the freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes and let the fat harden and then cut it. Makes it so much easier instead of trying to cut bacon that's room temperature, because when it's room temperature it's super gummy and tough to cut through. And you'll periodically stir your pot to ensure nothing burns. Now that all of your bacon is nice and crispy, you're going to grab a plate that's lined with a paper towel and start to strain all of your bacon right onto your paper towel. You want to get all of your bacon out of your pan. This way nothing's left behind to potentially burn when we cook our onion and garlic. Then it's best to use a slotted spoon for this so you can scoop out your bacon and leave behind most of that bacon grease. And it's also really helpful to tilt your pan. This way the bacon grease goes to one side, then you can scoop your bacon pieces to the opposite side and scoop everything out. Now that you have all of your bacon out of your pan and set aside for later, we're going to pour off most of our bacon grease out of our pan. You want to leave about 3 tablespoons left or behind in your pan for the next step. You can save your bacon grease and use it to cook hash browns, or if you don't want to use it, you could let it sit out and harden and then throw it away. Then to our pan that has our bacon grease, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We're going to crank our heat to medium. Now that our butter is melted and our pan is ripping hot, we're going to add 1 medium yellow onion that has been medium diced. You're going to give it a quick stir to coat everything in our fat. This way we get a nice even cook on all of our onion. Next we're going to hit our onions with a few pinches of kosher salt. You should always season as you go when you cook. Then we'll give that a quick stir to combine our onions with the salt. You're going to saute your onions until they become nice and translucent in color, or you can take it a step further like I did and give your onions a slight caramelization, which will give us more flavor. If you're going on the caramelization route with your onions, you're going to cook them for about 15 to 20 minutes over medium-low heat, occasionally giving them a stir until they become nice and golden brown in color. It does take a little bit longer than sauteing them until they're translucent, but in the end it's worth it. Now that our onions are nice and caramelized and golden brown in color, we're going to add 6 medium-sized garlic cloves that have been minced to our pot. You're going to cook your garlic until it becomes nice and fragrant, about a minute or 2, giving everything a good stir together. Now that your garlic has cooked and become nice and fragrant, we're going to add 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour to our pot. You're going to give everything a quick stir together to coat all of our onion and garlic. We're going to start to make a roux. The roux will thicken our soup. You want to cook the roux for about 4 to 5 minutes or until it becomes nice and golden brown in color. It's kind of hard to tell that it turns golden brown just because we have our caramelized onions in there, so it's best to go off for the 4 to 5 minutes. Cooking it for this extended period of time will help cook off the flour taste. And you want to keep an eye on this, giving it the constant stir. This way nothing burns. Making roux is a classic Grinch technique to thicken sauces, soups, or even gravies, and it helps bring flavor to your dishes as well. Now that you've cooked your roux for the time needed, we're going to add 3 cups of vegetable stock to our pot, and we're going to give everything a quick stir to break up our roux. It would have been best to use a whisk for this. This way it'd be easier to break up the roux, but in the end it all worked out. Next we're going to add 2 cups of milk. I used room temperature milk for this just to ensure that everything was the same temperature and it was easier for the milk to come to temp and it wouldn't break on us. And keep stirring everything together until all of your roux has broken up and dissolved into your stock and your milk. Next we're going to add 2 pounds of potatoes to our pot. It doesn't have to be exactly 2 pounds. It can be a little over or a little under. It'll be fine either way. You can use any style of potato you choose. I went with some Yukon Gold. You can also use russet potatoes or even red bliss potatoes. It doesn't really matter what you decide to use. You just want to ensure everything is cut the same. I went with about a medium dice on our potatoes potatoes because you don't want to go too small and you don't want to go too large. If you go too small, you're going to end up with mushy potatoes. And if you go too large, then somebody's going to have to dislocate their jaw to fit it in their face hole. Once you've added your potatoes to your pot, you're going to crank your heat up to high and bring your entire mixture up to a boil. You're going to occasionally give your pot a stir to ensure that none of your potatoes are burning and sticking to the bottom of your pot. Now that your soup has hit a rage boil, we're going to cover our pot with a lid and turn our heat down to a medium-low. We're going to simmer our soup until our potatoes are done. You know your potatoes are done when they're nice and tender and easily pierceable with a fork. Then a little tip for you is if you put your lid on your pot a little off-centered, leaving a small gap in between your pot and your lid, this will create a little vent for all the steam to be released from your pot, which will hopefully help prevent your pot from overflowing and making a large mess. Then again, stop thumb wrestling yourself in the back and give your pot the occasional stir to ensure that nothing's sticking to the bottom and burning. If your soup's anything like mine and the potatoes are close to being done but hasn't quite thickened up and is still fairly watery, which is totally an easy fix, we're going to make another roux on the side to add to our large pot of soup. So in a small saucepan, you're going to add equal parts of flour to butter. So we're going to add 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter to our small saucepan. And you could use any fat of your choice, like olive oil or even the bacon grease will be just fine. Now that our butter is nice and well melted, we're going to add 4 tablespoons of flour to our pot. Repeat the same exact process like we did previously when we started to make our soup. Over medium heat, you're going to combine your flour and butter together. You're going to keep mixing everything together until all of our butter is absorbed into our flour. And again, you're going to cook this for about 4 to 5 minutes or until it becomes a nice golden brown color. Then if this isn't enough roux for your desired thickness of your soup, repeat the same process until you get the desired thickness of your soup. And then on the flip side, if your soup becomes too thick, all you have to do is thin it out with some extra vegetable stock or chicken stock, or even use a little bit of extra milk, thin it out. And everybody's a bit different when it comes to potato soup and what viscosity they like of it. So you can play Goldilocks and figure out what's best for you and what your heart desires the most. Like before, you're going to keep stirring it to prevent it from burning. In the end, your roux should look like this golden brown color. Once it hits the golden brown color, you know that it's done. Now that our extra roux is done, we're going to add it directly into our soup pot. And you're going to whisk your extra roux in. This will help ensure that it dissolves into our soup to start to begin its thickening process. You don't have to add all of your roux in at the beginning. You can add half in and then see what it does and add the other half later, or if you don't need the other half, you can just go ahead and toss it. Once you add your extra roux to your pot, you're going to bring your soup back to a simmer. This will activate the thickening agent in our roux to start to thicken our soup. Food science, I tell you. Now that my heart is content with the viscosity and thickness of our soup and our potatoes are done, we're going to add half a cup of room temperature sour cream. It's important to add room temp sour cream because when we go to add sour cream to our liquid lava pot, this will help prevent it from breaking and separating in our soup. And you want to use a whisk to thoroughly mix in your sour cream, and it may thin it out just a touch, but in the end it'll still be thick. Next, we're going to add 1 cup of shredded cheese. It's best to shred your own cheese because the pre-shredded cheese has a coating on it to prevent it from sticking, and it'll just ruin our soup. And a lot of people use the orange sharp cheddar cheese, but I'm a special snowflake and used white sharp cheddar cheese because, yeah, I'm special. And it'll help keep our potato soup that white instead of turning it slightly orange from the orange cheddar. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. Just give everything a thorough mix together to melt all of our cheese into our soup. Now that we've added all of our goods to our soup, we're going to give it the old taste of roux and adjust the seasoning as needed. And I added a few pinches of coarse ground kosher salt and a few cranks of fresh cracked black pepper. And pepper in this is so good. Pepper and potatoes is just really good in general. And we'll give everything a quick stir to incorporate all of our seasonings into our soup. Next, grab your favorite soup bowl and start ladling yourself that healthy portion of your potato soup. Next, we're going to garnish our soup with some of our shredded white cheddar cheese, some of our crispy bacon that has been chopped. A little bit more won't hurt anybody. Then we'll give it a little slap of some sour cream on top and finish off with some fresh cut chives and dig in.
Now that our soup is done, let's give it the old taster. Right off the bat, it's aesthetically pleasing and it smells super good. Then the little goodies on top, you can't even see it. Oh, there you go. Make it look extra good. So let's give it a stir up. And then the chives on top. is a nice pop of color, gives it some contrast. Stir it up, stir it up. So right off the bat, our soup came out super delicious. It's nice and buttery and rich in flavor from all that bacon fat we had and all that butter that we added. Then we get that slight caramelization flavor from our onions. Then the texture on our potatoes is nice and tender still. They're not mushy at all, which is great. And then the bacon, also that crispy bacon, adds some more texture to it, which makes it perfect. So you get a perfect balance of soft potatoes and this crispy bacon. It's awesome. And then the sour cream definitely brightens up the whole soup. It brings that acid to help cut through all that rich flavor from our butter and bacon fat. And then of course, cheddar cheese is always good. We already all know that. Then the chive on top brings some bright herb flavors, which is perfect. And this soup is so awesome, it's good on any cold day. Alright, that's it for today's video. This recipe is really easy, and the soup definitely makes me feel warm and all fuzzy inside, especially on this overcast of a day. The soup is super hearty, so you'll definitely get really full off of it, and you can make this stretch over a few days to have a couple meals, or you can feed quite a few people with it because they're gonna get full. And if you enjoyed today's video, you should go check out my comfort food series. There's a ton of great videos, like some classic candy videos or some snacks, and we're gonna build as time goes on, so you should definitely keep an eye out for those. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching, and I think I'm gonna go try to find a funnel so I can pour this soup right into my face hole. So with that said, we'll see you on the next one. The toppings on top, that's the same thing. A ton of good videos on there, and we're building more as time goes on. And the fridge is making noise, even though I told it not to, okay? Should return it. You feel all warm and comfy and fuzzy. I don't know what that was, huh? On it. Row the boat. So right off the bat,